What's going on out here? This is Venus Love, aka Sword Fan Chick, back here with another video. And I'm here to bring in some more Hollywood commentary regarding the idea of inclusivity, exclusivity, representation, and diversity. As you guys know, I do a lot of topics talking about being black in Hollywood. Throughout the years, I enjoyed acting. I was in many acting classes in high school. I was on the acting team, and I was in acting classes in college. Of course, I've always felt that there weren't a lot of opportunities for black people like me in Hollywood. So today's topic was a little inspired from Jordan Peele's comments about casting white people in his movie. He had a little backlash regarding his statement where he says he doesn't see himself casting a white dude as the lead in his movies. Now, obviously, there's more to the story than that. You know, he does go further on to explain that it's not that he has nothing against white dudes, but there are basically many movies out here like that, with white people as lead characters. Now, the conversation that's being had by some white people and some black is that it seemed discriminatory, right? Which they are correct. It is discriminatory. But is Peele the only one guilty of this out of all the directors and producers in Hollywood? And is it necessarily racist? And should race matter? So, let's talk about whether race should matter. Okay? Let's talk about that. There's the crazy idea that race doesn't or shouldn't matter in conversations like this, right? And I agree to a certain degree that race shouldn't matter if we're talking about acting skill alone. But in regards to movie portrayals, race sometimes will matter, unfortunately. Why? Because the movie is meant to portray the vision of the director and producers. There's more involved with movie magic than just acting. The visuals play a role in portraying a movie authentically. And most directors often consider the authenticity of the material they are creating in regards to their own vision. These portrayals are not just limited to the way someone acts, but it also involves the way someone looks. Oftentimes, though, movie directors and executives consider the profitability of something as well. This is often why the best-looking actors and actresses get the lead roles in action films and romantic dramas, while the funniest-looking guy or girl gets roles in comedic films. The look of someone is just as important as the way they are acting. So the real question is, how does this affect people of color? Well, most of the time, white producers and directors have a tendency to cast white people to play their roles. Hey, we all have a tendency to see ourselves as default from time to time, but white people especially do because every movie and piece of media that they have is usually inspired from something from white culture. And because most American Hollywood producers and directors are white, and they only know the lives of white people, guess what? Most of the people that will be in the movies will be white. But this comes at a cost for people of color who are the farthest thing from white skin color. They will obviously be getting less opportunities because guess what? Black people don't fit the mold. Literally, casting ads tell you what producers are looking for ethnically. So it's not like this is some Hollywood secret of discrimination that only Peele is involved in. This is the way Hollywood is and has always been, just majority of the time towards people of color. So, is Peele's view racist? In order to claim something is racist, you would have to understand the definition of it. The definition of racism involves feeling one race is inferior or superior to another race based on generalized or stereotypical characteristics of a particular race. This is the definition found in every dictionary in the English language. Many people tend to fling this word around conveniently, so I can understand why many people get confused about when something is racist or when something is not. Oh, and by the way, you don't have to hate a race to be racist. You may even have friends of different races, and you may even like other people of different races. But if you find an entire race to be inferior, physically, ethnically, or culturally to another race, you are by dictionary definition of the word racist. Does that make sense now? And you can be racist towards your own race. Yes, you can. You can think your own race is inferior to another. It's still the same concept. So, let's look at Jordan Peele. Is what he said motivated by racism? Well, we can't always determine what motivates people to have a discriminatory attitude, but we can infer what his comments mean by examining the context of it. First of all, if you're only looking at the headliner of the news to determine this, of course your first impression would be racism if you're upset about his exclusion and you don't really understand what he meant. But if you've been paying attention to the way white actors and actors of color have been treated in Hollywood, this comment would automatically make sense as a move that is not racist, but instead meant to help give other races more equal representation to white people. I have heard some people say, what if a white person said what Jordan Peele said? People would claim they're racist, wouldn't they? Well, this kind of rhetorical question ignores intention and context. Again, a black person refusing to hire white people as the lead in order to focus on black lead roles is not racist if their intention is to get more equal representation in a movie space where almost every lead character is white in majority of movies. If a white person did in fact say, I don't see myself hiring a black person as the lead, we would have to consider their intentions from an ethical standpoint. Within this Hollywood climate, the truth is most lead roles are portrayed by white people. So there are 4 possible reasons why a white person would refuse to portray a black person. 1, they don't understand black people, so to avoid controversy or portraying them inaccurately, they default to a white character as the lead because that is what they know. That is what they're comfortable with. 2, they don't even think about people of color. They just think about a character, but oftentimes in their minds, those characters just happen to be white all the time. 3, they believe that white faces are more relatable and profitable due to past trends, especially because there are more well-known white actors. And 4, they believe white people are superior. Not all of these are racist reasons, except the last one, obviously. But what they have in common is that they are all implying that the person is ignorant, has a lack of experience, and or a general lack of interest in people of varying backgrounds. This is the difference between Jordan Peele's intentions and a white American's intentions when they say they're excluding someone. And again, a white person may say, I don't see enough white people in lead roles. But you'd have to prove that that is factually, statistically correct. As with the case of black people, it has been statistically shown that black people take the lead in movie roles less often than white people. And hey, I don't think white people should be forced to portray characters of color. Don't mistake that. I don't think that helps at all because in reality, we just end up being an afterthought. A blackwash portrayal of white characters, or we still end up in roles that portray us negatively just so movie executives can meet that diversity quota. At the same time, I do applaud and support movie producers who do consider people of color in their lead choices and sincerely show that people of color are people with their own stories to tell. And while I don't support blackwashing or whitewashing, I still support the idea of trying to reach out to black people and give us opportunities where we don't have it. And if we manage to get a producer of color, I'm definitely going to support that producer's decision to make full use of his position to give us the appropriate representation that we've been waiting hundreds of years for. It'd be different if almost every movie had black lead characters in it. Then this would be a different conversation. But again, context of what Jordan Peele was saying matters. Positive representation is even more important when portraying certain characters to an overseas market. Naturally, in other countries, most of the portrayals of foreigners have been from American media. Even within our American society, we tend to unfortunately learn about other races through what we see in American media, due to our communities being so dispersed from one another. While the internet has helped people see things a little clearer, it's usually Hollywood that oftentimes introduces these concepts to us before we even begin searching online. This means that American media has had a huge impact on how people of different races are seen. This is why versatile racial representation is so important. So, let's think about the history. A lot of white people have asked, why should we reflect on the history in order to make our decisions today? Why is history so important? Why should we constantly be reflecting on the past? Well, somewhat the situation of the past affects the present, especially because nowadays Hollywood has a tendency to only greenlight movies with well-known Hollywood actors. This means that actors in the past, or from the past, will have a better chance of getting movie roles today than new actors. And guess what? In the past, majority of actors that were hired were white, which means majority of actors that will be cast today will also be white. Anyway, let's talk about the history of racism in Hollywood. If we go well back into the 1920s all the way down to the 1950s, Black people didn't get a lot of opportunities to be Hollywood stars. Before then, blackface was the only time we ever saw portrayals of Black people, and this was usually done by white people putting on blackface makeup, and oftentimes they would portray us in sort of a stereotypical, mocking sort of way. Interestingly enough, it was in fact considered controversial and unethical to hire a Black person in the movies. It wasn't until the 1930s that more Black people were being hired in roles, most of the time as background characters involving slaves, servants, or idiots. So it's safe to say we didn't have the best representation in those days, and we were hardly ever lead characters. Oscar Micheaux was one of the very few producers that was Black during those times, and he did make Black movies for Black people. Unfortunately, he didn't get much profit from those movies because most Black audiences didn't have enough money to go and see these moving pictures, and white people just plain out didn't support them. Gone with the Wind was among the first major movies to portray a Black character in an important role, even though Hattie McDaniel's character Mammy was still in a slave role. But this was a leap for Black people because Hattie McDaniel was the first Black person to win an Oscar for her role. Unfortunately, she was still treated as inferior to her white counterparts and hardly ever got any important roles after that. In fact, if we think about it, there weren't a lot of important roles for Black people throughout that time period. Dorothy Dandridge was another very well-known Black American actress who got notoriety during those times. But again, these roles were few and far between. And if we think about other races in the past, most of the time Asian characters or Native American characters were portrayed by white people with very damaging stereotypes. Even well into the 1970s, it was considered very controversial to cast Black people in roles, but the demand for equal rights put more pressure on Hollywood to portray Black people. And it wasn't until the 1980s that Hollywood got used to it. I discussed this more in my video about whitewashing and blackwashing in Hollywood, but for now, this is the basic breakdown of how racism worked in Hollywood. In the 1980s, that was when Black people were able to produce their own shows, and it was through these shows that we were able to portray ourselves in the way we wanted to be portrayed. Because of the rise in popularity of Black entertainment, even white producers began to hop on the trend, casting Black people in more roles than ever before. Yet still, Black people struggled to get lead roles, resorting to mostly supporting roles. Furthermore, Black characters were mostly good for those comedic roles in major Hollywood movies. For Black men, getting a role was easier as a result than it was for Black women. For Black women, landing a role in a major Hollywood film was considered a feat, especially if she was in a role that didn't portray her negatively. A lot of times, Black women had to work harder than the average white female to be cast in roles in order to end up like Whoopi Goldberg. The fact is, Many old-time producers and directors of the past are still the ones running Hollywood. They have the big names behind them because of the businesses that they were able to create over the years. Unfortunately, there will never be a person of color in this lifetime capable of doing what Disney's white owners have done. Disney was able to build for so many years, even during a time when black people had little to no equal rights, allowing them to be part of the industry. Disney was formed during a time when black people were lawfully oppressed. Even Disney was discriminatory towards black people. Even in recent years, it could take so many years for black people to build up that kind of notoriety. Whether white people like to hear it or not, the levels of oppression black people experienced really set us back. While white people were able to build such Hollywood giants from the 1930s onward, black people were struggling to survive a system that didn't exactly favor black people. Because of this, today, black people honestly are going to struggle to compete because we were not given a fair shot from the start. That's why Jordan Peele and what he's saying and what he's doing is actually a good thing for black people, because we really need an even playing field. Going back to profitability, remember I mentioned that good looks are profitable for action and romantic films? The most popular movies today tend to fall into the action and romantic genres. And guess what the ideal look in this world is? White. Yes, everyone in the world wants to be white. This is partially because of white media. He who controls the media controls the world. But that is why people like Jordan Peele are important, because they can challenge the idea that white people are more profitable, more relatable, or even more attractive. There was a long understanding in Hollywood that white faces sell movies. Part of the reason is because positive white portrayals have been embedded into the white media for so long that white has been seen as the more attractive race, therefore the more profitable race to portray characters. Not to mention, white people have colonized so many lands that their standards of life and being has now become standard for all people. This cultural dominance puts them at a privileged position compared to others. People all around the world get a steady dosage of white American media and have been for centuries. This is why the past is important to understand, because the past has had an effect on the present, even regarding the movies. As a result, it has affected people's perception of white people, most times in a positive way, while other races are either unknown or unliked due to portrayals of us in American media. However, we are moving into a new era where people are ready to be proud of who they are, no matter what race, gender, or sexual orientation they are. Because people are becoming more interested in empowering themselves, movies like Black Panther and Wonder Woman, movies once considered less profitable, are now becoming more profitable. These movies are changing the tides and challenging Hollywood's narratives on whether or not a movie will be a box office hit with people of color in lead roles. Also, because digital streaming services like Netflix are challenging Hollywood's reign by opening up room for diversity, people of color are able to pitch their ideas to execs of the streaming services. Netflix is $1 billion industry right now, not only because it's affordable and convenient, but also because it caters to those who are overlooked by Hollywood. Now Hollywood has no choice but to try to fit in with the streaming services by trying to place some kind of token black character in their movies in hopes that they can still remain relevant in the next few years. Yet despite an increase of black people being hired for roles in Hollywood, we are still struggling to take the lead. This comes down to the fact that at the root of it all, there are hardly any white producers or directors who sincerely want to portray black characters, because at the default, they relate to white people. I can't fault them for portraying white people preferably, because that is what they are. At the same time, the majority rules, and this does put other races of actors at a disadvantage. With more people like Jordan Peele, however, perhaps there will be more opportunities for us as black actors. Thank you for tuning in for a listen, whether you agree or disagree. I personally think that people shouldn't be so upset about Jordan Peele's comments, and they shouldn't take it personally. It's nothing against white people. It's just that black people are at a disadvantage in Hollywood and really in life. And this is because of our historical disposition that we cannot help. You have to understand that. The past does affect the future. The past can't just go away. There are effects that come from it that we have to overcome in order to have a better future. Feel free to leave a comment. If you like this video, go ahead and leave a like. And I don't stop people from disagreeing, so whatever you have to say, go ahead and say it. All right, check you later.